The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Just because MLK Day is done doesn't mean the party's over. Okay, it kind of does. It kind of does. We go from the beauty, the magic, the wonder that is 11 consecutive basketball games on MLK Day to a 4-game Tuesday. And that's a bit of a letdown. But I'll be honest with you guys, with the amount of work that I'm putting into all this stuff, and it's more this year than any other year, and I think you guys know this. I hope that it shows in the prep for the podcast. I hope that it showed in a number of guests we've had on the show, and I hope it's shown with the addition of a lot of sports betting stuff to what we're putting out, as well as the tweet storms. These things it's really a ton of work. It's really nice to have a day where I don't have to do as much. So that'll be Tuesday. That'll be tonight. But we're not there yet, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot of things to cover. We had 6 revenge games on the MLK Day slate. 6 of them. And they went relatively well. 3 wins, 2 losses, and a push. So we'll take it. That's a positive outcome. We have 2, by the way, coming up on the Tuesday card. We have some really intriguing storylines from the MLK Day card. We have a DFS game open for tomorrow, Wednesday, here at The Hoob. Because, as usual, the Wednesday card is more interesting. There's 10 of them. This week is a little bit more traditional, I think you'd call it. Big Monday, small Tuesday, big Wednesday, small Thursday, big Friday. You get the deal. You get the idea. So let's shepherd you there. I think we'll try to keep this show a little bit shorter. We're going to do a nice long recap, but just not a whole lot of stuff to look forward to in the short Tuesday card. A little bit of stuff, make no mistake, but sometimes we get into these long-winded discussions on deep dive stuff, but I think as we move forward here, since we're officially in the downslope, guys, we're around the 60% mark of the season now, so it's all about digging in at this time of year. And then when guys pop up that are worth stashing, we'll do a little segment on that. And as we work our way towards the fantasy playoffs, we'll do a little segment on streaming. And of course, you can always get me with questions on the internet. This is Fantasy NBA Today. I am your host, Dan Besbris. Big thank you once again to everybody who continues to listen to the podcast every year. It's a bigger listenership than the previous year, and I love to look at the numbers season over season for me just to kind of see what the growth has been like, and it's been magical. Honestly, it's been incredible to see where we were at this point last season. What is today? The 22nd? 22nd of January. This is where we were the 22nd of January last year to where we are right now. And even to go an additional year back to what does that mean? It's freaking sweet. Let me just leave it at that. Last year around this time, the heck were we even doing at this point? There was actually a very small spike, believe it or not, around this time last year. I don't know what caused the re-engagement of fans, maybe the lead up to trade deadline stuff in early February, but we continue to be something like 30% more. I can do the math right. It's like 40% ahead of where it was last year. Anyway, it's sweet. I thank you for it. And if any of you out there listening to the podcast have not taken the time yet to rate and review, I'd really appreciate your thoughts. If you have some critical feedback, I'd always appreciate if you kept that to a Twitter discussion. I'm always interested. I'll take your suggestions seriously. It doesn't mean I'm going to implement all of them, but I am going to always consider them. And if those are left in a permanent place, then they leave a permanent blemish on my poor podcast body. So let me know on that front as well. Let's dig right into things, though. I don't have a lot of other stuff to go over on today's pod. We'll get you the link, obviously, to the DFS stuff when that becomes available. Oklahoma City and New York. We'll go through it chronologically from MLK Day. Oklahoma City is not a question mark team. It was a blowout, so guys like Nerlens Noel got a few extra minutes in the chamber. 6 points, 8 boards, 2 steals. He's a guy that we're watching for that rare Steven Adams injury, so damn durable. But if Noel could ever get unleashed, remember that one spot start he had earlier this year? We put up a top 25 line. This is a guy that, to me, that's almost a reason to sit on him. Because even if it happens like once a month down the stretch, which it probably won't because Oklahoma City is going to be fighting for playoff positioning, but what if he even turns an ankle or just has to miss like a day or a week? It would almost make it worthwhile for the whole season. I love guys like that. And you know I punt points in a lot of spots too. I just don't care about them that much. In a traditional atmosphere, he's more like a top 125 guy, so he's sitting towards the periphery of most of your fantasy teams. But that's not the team I want to talk about in this one. Let's talk about New York. Coming into this game, it looked like it was going to be a Luke Cornett and Mitchell Robinson, mostly two-headed center thing. Report surfaced right before the ball game that quoted the Knicks front office as saying that Enes Kanter's minutes were not a priority. That was the way that they phrased it, not a priority, which basically meant that from a night-to-night basis, he might just not play. That's a team's way of saying you're on the block, kid, and we don't want to run you into the ground. We don't want to risk getting you hurt. The only thing that could gum up the possibility of turning a veteran, solid, rebounding, interior scoring guy into nothing is an injury. And then Luke Cornett got hurt 6.5 minutes into the ball game, forced the hand of David Fizdale and the Knicks, and so Kanter got to play. He wasn't great. It was a tough matchup against Adams and a very difficult Thunder team, but he did play 11 points, 3 boards, and it seems like that now, depending on how this Cornett thing shakes out, sprained left ankle, is he back for the next one? I don't know. I would guess not. Sort of no reason to play a guy through pain on a tanking team. Means it's probably going to be Kanter and Robinson now as kind of a two-headed monster. And that, to me, means both of those guys are worth using because Robinson is just going to be out there until he fouls out. That's his game right now. He played 15.5 minutes and he fouled out. And some of them were stupid. You know, he was trapped under the backboard and just sort of like reached out and clotheslined Jeremy Grant going by. At some point, you just don't reach for the basketball. Just don't do it. You get your block on another play. But he was a perfect 4 for 4 from the field. He grabbed 6 rebounds, including a couple of offensive ones, had a steal and 2 blocks, and looks like sort of Rashawn Holmesian line without the much more refined play style of Rashawn Holmes. Noelian, it's Nerlensy as well. It's sort of these high per minute centers that can make a pretty big difference to your team. Now, he's not a good foul shooter. In fact, he's quite bad at the free throw line. I think he's around 53% this year, but he also doesn't go there very often because he doesn't know how to finish in traffic. When he gets a rebound, he's just going to stuff it back through. His shots are all going to basically be slams, putbacks, stuff right around the bucket, unguarded type of. He's not going to be creating offense. He's not looking to get to the free throw line. So he's a guy that you can utilize, and I don't think you're going to have to worry too much about the free throws because he's probably going to average taking like 1.5 to 2 a game in his limited minutes. But he's going to get it done. He's a must-own guy to me. He's only owned in 9% of Yahoo leagues, which seems completely insane, and he should be owned in yours for that blocks upside, which is just crazy high and through the roof. Points leagues, no. Not built that way. Be nice to see Tim Hardaway Jr. actually put a decent game up. I would see if you could trade him for a top 90 guy right around now. It's not going to get much better than that. Ever. Alonzo Dreer played well. Frank Ntilikina played well. So a couple of the starters saw their minutes reduced in this one. Kevin Knox and Emmanuel Mudiay were basically the guys who wore it for the most part. I think Mudiay will be better in the next one. He was getting worn out, and Ntilikina played well defensively in particular. Ntilikina looked good in this ball game. Mudiay continues to be your more points leaguey guy in that backcourt, and we'll wait and see what the deal is with Luke Cornett. So that's your Knicks report. Chicago, Cleveland. The Bulls beat up on really awful teams in the NBA. It's the craziest darn thing. They have basically every one of their wins against bad teams this year. They can't even tank right, but at least for Bulls guys that have Bulls on their fantasy team, it was good to see Chris Dunn nearly double-double with a couple of steals and a 3-ball. Zach LaVine had 25 points. Larry Market had a 13-8 with 3 3-pointers in his sort of poor man's Niko Mirotic impersonation. Bobby Portis only played 18 and a half minutes in this game, which surprised me a little bit, but he did have 15 and 5. He's going to be a per-minute scoring guy this year, but the other stuff is going to be a bit lacking. I still think he sits more in that top 110 to top 115 range, as opposed to, the call that he might be a must-own player. I don't know that he's must-own. He probably has a spot on a fantasy team. I mean, there's a nice line in 18 minutes, but it still was only 18 and a half minutes. Chandler Hutchison played 32 in this game. Robin Lopez, played 24 minutes in this game. So it's still weird, and Jim Boylan is still doing whatever goofy crap he feels he needs to. Cleveland side, I have some thoughts on as well. Ante Zizic, the fourth-string center for the Cavaliers, behind Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson, and Larry Nance, is putting up good numbers right now because he's a big man who can make free throws. And he's the only one left on the whole roster, unless you want to count Channing Frye as a viable big man, which he's not. He's like 45 years old. He doesn't move well, and he shoots the three ball. He's not going to get anywhere near the hoop. I don't know what's going on with Tristan Thompson, and you know me, I'm not one to panic early, but this has the sound of the shutdown type of injury. It's just a sore foot. We don't have a timetable. Suddenly he was just sort of out. We don't know if or when he's coming back. He might just be back in the next ball game, and all of this might turn out to be nothing, but it also concerns me that they're just like, you know what, screw it. Let's just play Zizic for a few games and see what happens. So for me, I'm in a couple of leagues where I'm a bit center-starved. Jonas Valanciunas, we talked about this a million times. I have JV everywhere, and he's been out for a month and a half, and so I've been down a center for almost a third of the season so far. So if I can find my way to a center with decent percentages, even if peripherally his stuff is not massive, not like knock your socks off numbers, I'm grabbing him. And for Zizic, since he's stepped into that starting role and played giant minutes with Thompson, Nance, and Love all out, he's been decent. He's had a block a game, half a steal. He's averaging around 8 or so and change rebounds. He's actually scoring okay, largely because everybody else on the team is awful, so everybody's going to get some kind of looks. And he's doing it on good percentages because he's just around the rim. And he did it against some decent teams, by the way. Portland, Utah, Denver, Chicago. He's going to get in there in garbage time because, again, there are no other centers, so he's going to be able to play against both good and bad opponents. They go into Boston on Wednesday. They might just get slaughtered, and that's actually fine because then he'll end up playing against God knows what center on the Celtics in garbage time, and he'll get a few buckets then too. Might happen against Miami, the next one. If Tristan Thompson comes back, yeah, you yank him out of your lineup. That's fine. But right now, we don't have a timetable. Zizic, believe it or not, over this 4-game stretch is posting top 40 value. That's a top 40 line. So he belongs in your lineup. The more I think about it, the more I think that the second that this podcast get released, there's going to be news breaking about Tristan Thompson and someone else coming back for the Cavaliers. We haven't heard anything yet. So until we do, that's the premise we're going to operate on. And the rest of this team is terrible. Truly terrible. We're nothing changes on that front. They really are the worst. They're 0-3 right now against the Bulls, who would seem to be almost equally bad, especially this, whatever Jim Boylan is trying to get them to do. They've been atrocious, and these two teams go head-to-head again, I think, in a couple of games. Yeah, they play on the 27th, so a little bit less than a week. It's almost like a home-and-home. I got a weird feeling the Cavaliers are actually going to bring a little bit in that ball game. They're 0-3 against the Bulls. They got to beat a terrible team one time, right? Maybe not. Detroit, the ultimate snooze fest in NBA fantasy circles, because not only does no one have any value for this team outside of, Drummond when he's healthy and Blake Griffin, but no one's even sniffing value, and the rest of these guys, it's so rare to have a team where there's only 2 players worth putting on standard 12-team rosters. Reggie Bullock is close. Reggie Jackson is not as close as the world might have you believe, and then no one else is even sniffing it. How can that be? I was told Dwayne Casey was a great coach. You guys heard it here, man. Remember when I talked about in the offseason that Dwayne Casey was basically backed into every success he had in Toronto? I get it. He's well-liked among other coaches. That's fine. But he ain't that good. I mean, yes, Toronto got Kawhi Leonard this offseason, and that made them better, but that's a loaded basketball team. Anyone. You would have had to crap on that team to make it so they didn't win last year. So don't give me the Dwayne Casey stuff. Anyway, good to see for our Detroit under, but from a fantasy perspective, the guy that I've been, and I mentioned I think yesterday, was it yesterday? Might have been, is Luke Kennard, and he had a terrible ball game. So what are you going to do? And I mentioned him as a guy I was watching, not a guy I thought you should put on your fantasy team. He's the guy that I'm hoping gets a little bit more opportunity. I'm not optimistic he will, but I'm hoping. For one brief night, everything was right with the Washington Wizards, and I mean that in a way that's less critical than it needs to be, because generally Washington's actually playing pretty well lately. Tomas Satoransky running a nice point guard as a low-usage, high-efficiency guy. He had too many turnovers in this game, that's for sure. But 10 points, 4 boards, 8 assists, 2 steals. The only thing he was missing was a three-pointer, and he would have had himself a pretty nice little 9-category game. Bradley Beal wasn't needed in this one because Trevor Ariza went huge, 20 and 12 on good percentages, no less. Otto Porter was good, and he will be the rest of the way. Jeff Green slowly being phased out as we figured he would. Thomas Bryant got 26 minutes. Jan Mahimi didn't. He played the other 20. And Bryant double-doubled with a block. And that's what you're hoping for out of him. Sam Decker, strong 19 minutes, but that's not going to be a needle-moving moment for him. The guys you're looking at are Ariza, Porter, Sato, Beal, and Bryant. You got 5 fantasy guys on this team. See, that's the way it should be. Sorry, Detroit. The Cavaliers are a 1 fantasy player team, which is just embarrassing. Dallas, triple-double for young Luka Doncic, who becomes the second youngest player ever to post one, just a shade older than Markelle Fultz. It will not be his last. Doncic, impressive young basketball player. By the way, if you happen to accidentally forget to set your lineup and left Wesley Matthews in as an accident, it really paid off for you. You had 10 money counters in this game, and that ain't happening anytime soon. Dorian Finney-Smith got a bunch of extra minutes in this ball game instead of Maxi Kleber, which is upsetting. Dwight Powell got ejected, believe it or not. Dennis Smith Jr. is expected back in the Mavericks' next ball game, which was probably going to make life difficult for Kleber anyway, and it just got that way a game early, which sinks, because he was a guy that I was looking at as potentially a short-term source of blocked shots. There's a stat that, to me, is just so valuable and hard to find, that if you can get a guy who's doing it with some threes, doing it with some measure of efficiency, he'd be a fantastic addition to a basketball team, but it doesn't look like there's going to be enough consistency there, so I'm okay with moving on. He's a guy I picked up in the hopes that it would pan out. It doesn't look like it's gonna, so you rumble right along, and maybe he's the guy you drop to pick up Zizic. Nothing else for me on the Milwaukee side. I'm not picking up Dorian Finney-Smith. We've seen this tale one too many times. Milwaukee, same old story. They're not a fantasy storyline. Much the way the Pistons aren't a fantasy storyline, Milwaukee's not a fantasy storyline, but they're the opposite side of the coin because they have a bunch of guys that are all really fun. Brook Lopez, great year. Malcolm Brogdon, Eric Bledsoe, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Middleton, who's been slumping on and off. He's looking like he might actually be the worst of all of them at the end of the year, believe it or not. I think, how far has Brogdon come? Is he now in front of Middleton? Brogdon's number 66. Middleton is 59. They are close to one another, guys. I did not have Middleton as the lowest ranked Milwaukee Buck. Brook Lopez, 51. Yep, he's ahead of both of them. Eric Bledsoe's been playing his little butt off lately. He's number 36. And then Giannis is number 8. He's climbed his way up into the top 10. His free throw percentage is at 70 now, complementing the other stuff. 1.4 steals, 1.5 blocks. That's been doing it nicely for him. Good to see some of that stuff rebounding a little bit. Still awfully hard to win free throw percent if you've got Giannis on your team in Roto. Head-to-head, it can balance out a little bit. He could have a couple of games where he doesn't clang them, and then you can overcome it. In Roto, you can still overcome it, but it's such a high volume 70% that it actually has almost as big of an impact as somebody shooting, high 50s that just doesn't take that many. He's weighing you down with a not as terrible a percentage, but a much larger weight at that percentage. But you guys on this are getting into stuff that doesn't matter. Let's keep moving. Orlando, Atlanta, Jonathan Isaac, signs of life, 8 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, and 2 blocks. Almost an across-the-board line. He was missing 1 3-pointer, and that was it. He played 32 minutes of strong defense in this ballgame. But as you guys know, I've made it my decree here on Fantasy NBA Today and on Twitter that he needs to post 3 good lines in a row before I even consider doing anything with them. And then basically everybody puts up good lines against the Atlanta Hawks. Their defense is not very good. They play a very high-tempo basketball game. Kind of fun, actually. The Hawks are kind of fun to watch. They get up and down the floor. They're chucking up shots. They're having a good old time out there, and it makes for a fun evening for the other side. Evan Fournier, 29-7. Terrence Ross, 16, 5, and 7. I think that was a career high 7 assists for him in this ball game. And of course, Vooch, 29-14. That's kind of your given. But Jonathan Isaac, good to see him post a decent line. Let's see if he can do it again in their next one. The Magic, let's see, when is next game for Orlando? We can look that up pretty quickly. They play on Wednesday in Brooklyn. Opportunity potentially there. And for Isaac, he hasn't been terrible the last week. Okay, he hasn't been good. 8 points, 5 boards, 2 assists. Is that right? Really, 0.3 steals and 0.7 blocks? That doesn't seem right. Are they 5 games over that week right now? Is that why? Maybe it has. Oh, because it hasn't included this one. By the way, recording this very late at night on Monday evening. It hasn't updated yet to include this slightly better basketball game. So that'll come up a tad. Still not great, but very small signs of life. On the Atlanta side, Kevin Huerter was a late scratch with a neck issue, and that allowed DeAndre Bembry to get loose for 34 minutes, 11 and 2, with 7 assists, 4 steals, and 2 blocks. He's a fantastic defensive stats guy. Can rack them up by the bowlful. Percentages tend to kill him. He just managed to kind of hang on in this ball game. I don't get the feeling that Herter's going to miss a whole lot of time, so I'm not out there picking up DeAndre Bembry and trying to stream him for 1 or 2 games because he's shooting 43% from the field and 60% at the free throw line with almost 2 turnovers a game in a low ball handling spot. So no, I'm not a massive DeAndre Bembry fan. Even though the defensive stats are outstanding, he hurts you in too many places. And more than likely, the Hawks are on their way to getting back a couple of guys that are going to squeeze him out. More Taurean Prince means less DeAndre Bembry. Kevin Huerter would mean less Bembry. Bazemore would mean less Bembry. All of these things kind of put the grip on whatever value he's able to carve out for himself. Alex Len, Omari Spellman still sitting behind Dwayne Dedmon. We don't know if he's going to be moved. We do know he's on the block, but he posted 24 and 9 in this ball game. Fine effort from Dwayne Dedmon, who's had a nice season, all told. If he ends up as a reserve on some team, though, his value is going to go straight into the toilet, so milk what you can out of it now. You're not going to be able to trade him because people are aware that he's on the block, so your best recourse is either to use him as a kicker in a trade, like, hey, here's a 4th rounder and Dwayne Dedmon, give me your 3rd round guy back, or just use him for the next 2.5 weeks, maybe hope he doesn't get moved, and still gets to play 26 minutes. I don't know if I see it happening. Do the Hawks really want to develop Alex Len and Omari Spellman? Neither one of those guys is very good. What do I think is going to happen? I think he probably ends up getting bought out. So life is probably going to get tougher for Dedmon owners after the All-Star break. And I'm inclined to say just see if we can squeeze a handful more games out of him before that happens. Trae Young, Well, you know the Trae Young story. He was slightly better in this ball game. We'll give him that, but no threes, no steals. His percentages weren't terrible, and that, by all accounts, is a small win for Taurean Prince. 9 points, 2 boards, 4 out of 10 shooting. He's getting there. I tried to write this in a tweet, and it's hard to condense these thoughts into 140 characters or 280 or whatever you can do these days. With Taurean Prince, I'm waiting until his minutes limit is removed to activate him, either from my injured list or just to take him off of my bench and put him back into a starting role. I'm not willing to utilize my games cap or punt some other guy to the waiver wire if it's an injured reserve situation until Prince is allowed to play 30 minutes. And I do think he'll get there because this team is trending younger. Remember how good Prince was after the All-Star break last year? I don't think he's going to get to that point because Trae Young is going to be doing a lot of ball handling. There's going to be a Herder that deserves the ball. I don't know if Baze is still going to be there. I know they're trying to move him. Is Jeremy Lin still going to be there? All of these guys that are potentially on the go. Sometimes that just doesn't happen. And buying a guy out is sort of, what's the point? If they can maybe help a young guy. So it's tough to know exactly what's going to take shape in Atlanta. But for Taurean Prince, while perhaps the upside isn't quite what it was last year, just because there are more young guys that demand the basketball this season, I also think he's going to be better post-break than pre-break, and I also think they're going to try to play him 30 minutes. So let's get him to that point, and then we can trot him out there. Sacramento got blitzed in the second half by the Brooklyn Nets. Ed Davis was great in this ball game. Joe Harris was great in this ball game. D'Angelo Russell was great. Brooklyn's a tough team to trust beyond D'Angelo Russell, sometimes Spencer Dinwiddie, and Jarrett Allen. Ed Davis, I mentioned as a rebounding specialist, but you got to use him every night because if you miss the 16-rebound game, you're going to get the 5-rebound game, and you're going to go, Dan, what the crap were you talking about? And Joe Harris is very safe. Remember way back, like a month ago, when Alan Crabb was supposed to be coming back soon? Well, that didn't happen, and so Joe Harris has this role just all locked up. How is he only 59% owned? That's stupid. The world is stupid. New Orleans 105, Memphis 85. Ugh, no Anthony Davis, and New Orleans still beat Memphis by 20. This was a kick to the groin for the Grizzlies. Make no mistake. Marc Gasol, the report coming out that he's playing through injury. He had a decent ball game, all things considered. So did Mike Conley. But Memphis is just so anemic on the offensive side of the basketball. Jaren Jackson Jr. looks okay, but he's not blocking shots these days. JaMychal Green in a big slump again after a brief hot stretch. At least, that was the bad news. Bad news is Memphis has fallen apart, and I think folks are jumping the gun a little bit on tank for Memphis because, and I mentioned this on yesterday's show, they got too many wins early in the year to go full tank. They're not going to get into that bottom 3. So at a certain point, you're just jockeying for a draft pick between like 5 and 15, and I mean, then you just got to make sure your scouting department is doing the right amount of research. So I don't know that they're going to go into a full tank and they're just going to shut down Gasol or Conley. Remember, Marc Gasol actually played pretty much all of last year. He played down the stretch even when they were in tank mode. He just played like 3 quarters instead of 4. So I'm not going to panic on these guys yet. I don't think that you just sell Gasol for the first bag of beans that comes your way. If you can get another top 40 guy for him, I might consider it. Just someone who's playing healthy, someone maybe trending up, ranked a little bit lower than Mark. Same deal with Mike Conley, but I'm not out there looking to just punt on these guys. And also, I think it's worth noting that Memphis has finally turned the small forward keys over to Justin Holiday, or shooting guard, depending on what you think he is or what you think Garrett Temple is. He played 37 minutes in this ball game. He only took 8 shots, and he's probably not going to take that many on a game-to-game basis, but 4 steals and 2 3-pointers is always worth it. Always. So he demands a spot on your roster. And if you gave up on him, I don't blame you, because I did too. But when he saw that first game of 30-some-odd minutes 2 games back, I thought, okay, and they had a back-to-back. And so in that next one, when he did it again, that became, to me, a must-own spot because they were getting blown out, and they played him the last 6 or 7 minutes of the game just to get him more reps with his teammates. That was their way of saying, you're in, kid. Go do it. I would have liked a little more production, maybe an assist in this ball game would have gone a long way. He's not going to shoot a high percentage because most of his looks come from downtown. But when things are going right for Holiday, it's going to be a boatload of threes and steals, and then the other stuff just sort of falls in around it because he is very much a steals-heavy version of the Thad Marvin line kind of guy. He can be low usage and still pile up stats. It's more fun when he's higher usage, which is what he was to start the year in Chicago, but that's not really his role, and it won't be here in Memphis. But he should still be on your fantasy team. To me, he's must-own. Yes, Omri Caspi was out. That probably takes a few minutes away. But remember, Garrett Hempel played 38 minutes also in this game. So Caspi's 18 to 20 minutes is going to come from a smattering of different places. So I don't think you have to panic on Justin Holiday. I think he's locked into 28 or more minutes basically every night, and he should be on your fantasy team. He's going to be a top 100 guy in that amount of time. Oh, Miami. You did exactly what I said you were going to do. Sometimes I hate guessing right. And on yesterday's podcast, I said aloud, I think, pretty sure this wasn't a thought that just happened in my head, that I had given up on everybody besides Josh Richardson and Hassan Whiteside. And my logic on that was it's going to rotate on a night-to-night basis who actually gets to play. Because Derek Jones played, 9 minutes in their last game? And I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. All he needs is 22 minutes to be a marvelous fantasy asset, but he's not getting it. It's 18, then it's 25, then it's 9, then it's 14, then it's 17. And then I said, and I'm pretty sure it was almost verbatim, I said, one of these games, they're going to play him 27 minutes, and he's going to pop off. And we're going to forget about all those clunkers in between. But my message once again is don't forget about those clunkers, because as much as we all love Derek Jones Jr., and I do, I picked him up everywhere, this 29-minute game gets averaged with the 10-minute game from the previous one, and then he's sitting closer to 20 minutes on average in a good stretch. He was a game changer for them. They brought him in, and he helped lift them back into the game in the second quarter. He was a big deal because Justice Winslow was hot garbage in this ball game. Believe it or not, Dion Waiters was actually not terrible in this one. Tyler Johnson, not good. James Johnson, not good. Rodney Magruder, epically bad. Kelly Olynyk didn't even get to play. Bam Adebayo, decent. Believe it or not, Hassan Whiteside actually wasn't that bad in this ballgame. He always gets blamed for everything, but it wasn't really his fault. Kyrie Irving and Al Horford were just great. But the problem, of course, is with Miami is that they run 11 or 12 players deep every night, and it's always just about finding whatever 5 guys in any moment are playing okay. And on this one, it was Derek Jones, Josh Richardson, Bam, Dion Waiters, and at times, either Dwayne Wade, Winslow, or Tyler Johnson. That was it. Which, you hear that and you're like, what? You just listed 8 guys. Which of those dudes were on the floor? I mean, it was roughly those guys. So, do you trust Bam in the next one? Probably not. Josh Richardson? Yeah. Derek Jones? He might play 29 minutes again in the next ball game, and then he might go down to 6 in the game after that. You just can't trust this Miami team when 11 guys are all vying for real minutes. Kyrie Irving had a huge one. Of course, the week I'm playing the team with Kyrie. That's how it always goes for all of us, isn't it? Al Horford looked great. Marcus Morris busted back out of his mini slump. And those are the guys that stayed above the cut line for Boston in this one. No Jimmy Butler for the Philadelphia 76ers. Didn't matter. Joel Embiid had 32 and 14 against the roughly centerless Houston Rockets, but they did have Kenneth Faried, and we'll talk about him in just a moment. Don't know what the deal is with Jimmy Butler. Sounds like he's day-to-day, so hopefully he'll be back for their next one. With him out, you saw a little more Landry Shamet, a little more TJ McConnell, but it was mostly the main guys. And then Wilson Chandler did some extra rebounding in this game. But no, you're not trusting him. Houston, that's the side I want to talk about. So they got blown out. So the minutes are not necessarily what you're going to see moving forward. But we had a better idea of what this team was going to look like in the non-Clint Capela, non-Chris Paul contingent. When Chris Paul comes back, you're obviously going to see a big change in the backcourt. Guys like Austin Rivers will take a hit. Presumably guys like Gerald Green will probably play fewer minutes. Eric Gordon, I don't think his minutes are coming down from 27. He's probably working his way back up, in fact, more than anything else. He had his first 2 or 3 shots in this game, and then he just got goose-egged the rest of the way. James Harden's going to be fine. PJ Tucker is going to be fine because they need his toughness at that 4 spot and even sometimes a little bit at the 5. James Ennis, his minutes are by no means set in stone. Same deal with Gerald Green. Nene got the start at center for the Rockets, but he played only 8 minutes. Kenneth Faried, who basically just flew into town and hopped into a ball game, played 23 minutes and had 13 and 6 with a 3-pointer. We've seen Nene, and by the way, big thank you to the dude on Twitter, whose name I'll look up as we're doing the podcast right now. I think he goes by WESYAP for basically quoting yesterday's podcast and saying, Dan, you said 14 and 8 was a best case scenario for Faried, and you predicted 12 and 7, and then he came out there and had 13 and 6. Well, here's the thing. With guys like Faried, where we have a portfolio, it's pretty easy to just sort of eyeball it and tell you what's going to happen. I was, by all accounts, pleased with the outcome of this ball game on the Kenneth Faried front. 23 minutes was a really nice sign in his first game with Houston. He hasn't learned anything about what they're doing yet, so that's a number that could actually come up from 23, and that's cool to think about, that he could actually move up to 25, 27, and if he gets into that 27 range, then you're talking about that number I mentioned on yesterday's show, which was more of a best case of 14 or 15 points, 7, 8, 9 rebounds, and then you hope that because he's like, and I've said this before, yesterday, he's like a poor man's Montrezl Harrell, you hope that he can kind of accidentally tumble into a steal or a block every once in a while. He's not particularly strong in those departments. Historically for Faried, and you go back to the years in Denver where he was playing 27 minutes a game, when he was between 27 and 28 minutes a game, he was averaging about 0.8 and 0.8. So some steals, some blocks, but not a ton of either. He's not a good foul shooter, career 65%, so you got to hope he doesn't go to the line very often. He is a very good field goal percent guy, and that will definitely continue with Houston because his looks are all going to be lobs and pocket passes from Harden leading to dunks. So there's a very real chance that he shoots 58%, 57, 58% on like 7 or 8 shots a ball game, and that could be helpful. And, 14 and change points and 7 to 9 rebounds, that's helpful. And you just have to hope that the 65% free throw shooting is on, 2 a game and not 4 or 5. And you hope for 0.7 steals and 0.7 blocks. I think all of that rolled together means he's a guy that should probably be owned in fantasy leagues. He should be on your teams. I picked him up in a few spots. I think I got him in 2 out of my money leagues. I didn't grab him in the more points format he won, and I didn't grab him in the other head-to-head league because his value is limited by the return of Clint Capela. But in the meantime, as we mentioned before with Zizic, centers are hard to come by. Faried has center eligibility in most leagues, and so that's a guy it's worth gambling on. I think you're looking at a top 100 stretch, somewhere in that 85 to 110 range if you want to give it a little more wiggle room on each side. Portland beat Utah 109-104. Not much going on the Portland side. Wanted to see what was going on with Mo Harkless. He didn't do very much. Did have a steal and a block, and he always does, but you got to get the minutes higher than 18. For Utah, the return of Ricky Rubio was the question mark. What would that do to Donovan Mitchell? The answer is very little, but it did render Joe Ingles largely useless in his ball-moving capacity, and his big-time drop-off of a season continues. Rough. I don't know if you can bench any of those guys. I mean, Rubio you can bench until they take the minutes cap off, but I don't know if you can bench Ingles despite the struggles. Maybe you can. I'll put that one on you. I think I might. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper, and I might get cute with it. And then you got the Warriors blowing out the Lakers, which everybody basically saw coming. It was a revenge game for Golden State. Remember, the Lakers embarrassed them on Christmas. And the Lakers are without LeBron, without Rondo, and without Lonzo Ball. This is a team without a captain right now, and they just sort of floated ugly through this game. But JaVale McGee got his 19 minutes. He had 10 and 9. No blocks because, Warriors. But if he's getting 19 minutes, he'll be totally fine. That's more than enough time for him to get his 2 blocks a ball game. So stick with JaVale. Hope that... It sounds like Rondo might be back for the next ball game. And that could be enormous for the Lakers. And he'll pile up stats with this bunch of ragtag weirdos until LeBron comes back. And I still think he'll be relevant even after that. For the Warriors, they ran this thing up early. Klay Thompson did most of the damage. The one player I think everybody was monitoring was Boogie. Played 21 minutes, had 8 and 9 with 5 assists. Looked a bit rusty in this ballgame, shooting 2 for 9 with no threes or defensive stats. And it's going to be a slow climb for him from 16 to 21 to 23 to 26, whatever it is. I don't know what the target for a dude coming off an Achilles thing is. But as I said yesterday, he's on schedule by all accounts, and by trade deadline a couple weeks from now, he'll be fine. You might even be able to start him by next week, depending on how the rust comes off. But again, hasn't played in a long time, so give him a little bit of a break. Revenge games, as I mentioned, went 3-2-1. New York and Cleveland lost. Boston pushed, and the 3 wins were the Wizards, the Blazers, and the Warriors. So ever so slightly in the positive on that one. 2 revenge games on the very short Tuesday evening card. Let's continue to track them if nothing else. The Kings lost to Toronto at home. They're finishing up a little MLK and then to Toronto back-to-back. It's a hard back-to-back, but they also lost by a bunch in Brooklyn, so I think they're going to come out with a little fire. Portland is on revenge again after they finally got some against Utah. They'll have it against Oklahoma City. Both of these teams also played on MLK Day, so I don't know. I mean, the note here certainly is that Portland played a later game. Oklahoma City was done by the midday, but they also had to travel farther, so we'll call it a wash. What do we care about in terms of what we're watching on the 4-game card? Well, not much with Sacramento and not a whole lot with Toronto. Very little with Portland. I mean, maybe Mo Harkless plays in a back-to-back. That would be something to monitor. Nothing with Oklahoma City. Clippers, question is Lou Williams. Is he going to be playing in this game? If not, it sounds like he's close enough where I'm not picking anybody up. But Danilo Gallinari sounds like he might miss another week, so here we go on that one. Dallas, they're rotating cavalry of who is mildly relevant. We'll get another alteration with Dennis Smith back. And then Minnesota-Phoenix is probably the one game I actually care a little bit about from a fantasy standpoint. Still kind of getting a feel for Taj Gibson in Minnesota. We got an update on Robert Covington that he was spotted doing some jumping on the sidelines, which is pretty good. That means there's some mild progress being made. Still no official timetable, but as I said yesterday, my hope is still 2 weeks. That's my hope. It's me 100% reading the tea leaves. I have no official information on this, but if you're game planning, I would say don't expect him back any sooner than that, and if he shows up, let it be a wonderful surprise. Phoenix, still don't know who's playing in this one. Sounds like DeAndre Ayton is closer to doubtful. Rashawn Holmes is questionable. Of course, in a perfect hoopball world, Ayton is out, and Holmes is in and gets to play 35 minutes and gets to go nuts. We love it. I do love Mikal Bridges, especially for my punt points teams. He just has such insane upside in the threes and defensive stats categories, and he tends to sort of fall his way into a few of the other ones, which I know lately it hasn't come as much, but to me, he's a guy you got to hang on to. I've also mentioned before that I'm less confident in DeAndre Melton continuing to put up numbers, and it does look like he's fading a bit with Devin Booker and Jamal Crawford seeing some time at the point. And that's your Tuesday show, everybody. Tomorrow, Mike Apotria on the pod. We'll talk some DFS, get you ready for the Hoopball contest. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Dan Besbris, at Hoopball Fantasy, or at Hoopball Tweets. If you want to get into the contest, you can also let me know if you'd like to get on the email list. And, of course, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. I have nothing to push on you today other than the wonderful product from our favorite buddies at Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. I will tell you, I didn't need it on MLK Day. I was too freaking jazzed all damn day just from watching basketball, but I will today. With only 4 games, I got something to get me through the day. Hawaiian Isles, Kona Coffee Company. HawaiianIsles.com is the website. Search for Hawaiian Isles on Amazon. Check them out on Twitter at HI Kona Coffee. Love those guys. I think they're actually sponsoring a golf tournament right now. If you'd like to check out what's going on over on their website, I'm sure it can tell you a little bit more about that too. Demo it, man. Get something. Get some of their coffee, try it out, and let us know what you think. I know I already asked you to do a rate and review on the pod, but also try some coffee. 2 things I'm asking you to do on today's show. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the MLK Insano Day. It's my favorite. I'm sad that it's over, and now what? I don't get day games anymore. Soul-crushing news. But hey, trade deadline's only 2.5 weeks away. We'll have a live show. Shh, don't tell anybody. Hoopball, as always, will have the longest trade deadline live show. We will break the news way faster than those clowns on ESPN. Sorry, guys. They got to check their phones all the time. They got to talk on television. Guess what we get to do? We get to do it on YouTube, so we can just sit there, and while one person's talking, the rest of us know how to follow Twitter. And while Woj is on TV, by the way, bless you, Woj, because you get us our information, while he's exchanging text messages with 95 different GMs and front office people, we just get to wait for that one tweet to go out. And we don't have to wait for a graphics team to make some sort of thing to pop up on the screen. We can just stop whoever's talking and go, wait, and then break the news. It's the best, man. We'll get you ready. That's Thursday, trade deadline morning. That's 2.5 weeks from today. We'll obviously keep you updated on that. I am Dan Besbris. This is Fantasy NBA Today. We will talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.